Have you ever felt someone pulling away just when you got closer, like they vanished into silence, but something in your gut told you they still care? What if I told you you're absolutely right? What if I told you that when an avoidant misses you, they don't chase, they hide doubt, and it's not your fault. It's their survival strategy. You're not crazy for sensing their love behind the distance. You're just witnessing a person at war with their own heart. They don't pick up the phone. They don't say, "I miss you." You don't get late night texts, heartfelt messages, or tearful calls. But don't be fooled. Just because an avoidant doesn't express it out loud doesn't mean they don't feel it deep in their core. In fact, their silence is the message, if you know how to read it. When an avoidant misses you, they don't move toward you, they pull further away. It's the opposite of what most people do. For someone secure or anxious, missing someone might mean reaching out, reminiscing, reconnecting. But for an avoidant, missing you activates a threat. It reminds them that closeness makes them vulnerable, and vulnerability feels like danger to them. So, instead of expressing longing, they retreat into isolation. They might sit in the same room you once laughed in together, scroll through your old messages, look at your pictures, replaying every word in their head. But instead of calling you, they stare at the screen until the phone turns black. Not because they don't care, but because they care too much and don't know how to handle it. Their missing you isn't absent, it's buried. They bury it under routine, under distractions, under logic. They tell themselves, "It wasn't that serious, I need space, I'm better off alone." But if they really didn't care, they wouldn't need to say that at all. Indifference doesn't need a speech. It's the internal debate, the wrestling between longing and self-protection, that gives away the truth. They do miss you, they just can't bring themselves to show it. And if you're someone who craves words, who wants reassurance, who needs validation, this silence will feel brutal. You'll wonder, was it all in my head? You'll question your intuition. But the truth is, your intuition is right. Something inside you knows. They're not done feeling this. They're just hiding behind the only shield they've ever known, distance. Because to an avoidant, saying, "I miss you," feels like handing you a weapon. They fear if they expose that soft spot, you might use it to hurt them later. So they do what they've always done, shut down, withdraw, pretend. But inside that silence, there's a storm, a deep, aching storm that quietly screams, "I miss you too. I just don't know how to say it." When an avoidant starts missing you, they don't sit with that feeling. They don't allow it to rise up, move through them, or guide them toward reconnection. Instead, they run. They distract. They bury the emotion under layers of noise, activity, and artificial peace. The moment the longing begins to surface, they go into survival mode, not because you're dangerous, but because feeling anything deeply is. You see, avoidants were often conditioned, whether through childhood neglect, emotional unavailability, or inconsistent love, to believe that closeness comes at a cost. To feel deeply is to lose control. So when they miss someone, that ache doesn't inspire connection like it would in most people. It activates panic. Not the kind you can see on the outside, the kind that lives under the surface. The kind that says, "If I lean in, I might get hurt again." So what do they do instead? They fill their calendars. They immerse themselves in work, projects, tasks, endless to-do lists. They'll clean their entire apartment at midnight, scroll endlessly through social media, or binge watch series they don't even enjoy. They'll go out with friends, pretend they're fine, laugh a little louder, smile a little bigger, all while a quiet ache builds in the background. They might even start dating someone new, not out of genuine interest, but because they're trying to erase the space where you used to be. They think if they stay busy enough, loud enough, distracted enough, the missing will disappear. But it doesn't. It waits. It lingers behind every task, behind every laugh, behind every screen they stare into, hoping for something that makes them feel okay again. The truth is, the distraction isn't about you at all. It's about them not knowing how to sit with their own vulnerability. Because to sit in that missing means they'd have to admit they cared. It would mean facing the part of themselves that still feels unsafe with connection, the part that was never taught how to love and still feel free. And so, the distraction becomes their drug, their way of numbing the very emotion they don't want to name. But behind all of it, the hustle, the silence, the "I'm fine" mask is one raw, unspoken truth. They miss you more than they'll ever admit to themselves. When an avoidant misses you, one of the first things they do, often without even realizing it, is blame you. They start rewriting the story, not because you were wrong, not because you did anything unforgivable, but because it's safer to make you the problem than to sit with their own pain, longing, and fear. Blame becomes their emotional shield. It gives them a false sense of control. Because if they can convince themselves that you were too needy, too intense, too unpredictable, then they don't have to face the truth that they still feel something for you, that they miss you, that they still care. And for someone with an avoidant attachment style, caring feels like vulnerability, and vulnerability feels like weakness. So instead of leaning into the truth, they retreat into judgment. They start focusing on everything that went wrong. Every disagreement becomes a red flag. Every moment of closeness now looks like a threat they narrowly escaped. They highlight your imperfections, magnify your emotional reactions, and twist their own narrative to make you the villain. Because if they're the victim of your emotional overload, then their silence and distance become justified. It's not fair, but it's not malicious either. It's a form of emotional self-protection they've learned to survive with. Blame helps them put emotional distance between themselves and the discomfort of missing you. It's their way of staying in control, of keeping the upper hand in a situation where their heart is quietly crying for someone they don't know how to ask for. They might even talk to others about how crazy or clingy you were, not to hurt you, but to convince themselves they made the right choice by pushing you away. They reinforce the story over and over until they believe it. Because if they don't, the alternative is terrifying, that they pushed away someone who genuinely cared, that they're alone now, not because of your behavior, but because of their own fear. And the moment that truth begins to rise, when the missing becomes too loud, when the memories start breaking through their mental defenses, blame rushes back in like a flood. Because taking responsibility for how they feel means opening a door they've spent their whole life trying to keep shut. Deep down, they're not angry at you. They're terrified of what it would mean to admit they still want you close. An avoidant can convince themselves in their mind that they've moved on. They can tell themselves, "I don't need that person. I'm better off alone." They can use logic like a sword to cut off every emotional tie that once bound them to you. But the body doesn't follow orders the way the mind does. The body remembers. Long after they've gone silent, long after they've convinced themselves they're fine. Something deeper within them continues to ache. They might wake up in the middle of the night with a tightness in their chest and not know why. Their appetite might change. Music, scents, places. They begin to trigger waves of emotion they didn't expect. They start to feel a heaviness they can't explain because they've buried the reason under layers of denial. That's the thing about emotional suppression. It never actually deletes the emotion. It simply displaces it. And for avoidants who are experts at suppressing feelings to avoid vulnerability, their body becomes the silent carrier of all the unspoken words, the unresolved pain, and the longing they refuse to name. They'll sit alone, scrolling aimlessly, and suddenly feel a pang of sadness when they see something that reminds them of you. Their stomach might drop when they see your name or hear a song you once shared. They might find themselves distracted during conversations, their mind drifting back to a moment with you they never fully let go of, even if they've told themselves otherwise 100 times. And still, they won't call. Still, they won't reach out. Because admitting they miss you means confronting the very emotions they've spent a lifetime avoiding. So instead, they try to regulate the storm internally. They go for walks. They exercise. They try to sleep it off. They rationalize, compartmentalize, justify until they've quieted the achy enough to move through another day. But it never fully goes away because their body continues to hold the grief of every word they never said, every hug they didn't ask for, every chance at closeness they pushed away out of fear. Their mind can lie, but their body tells the truth. They don't realize it, but every tear they hold back, every moment of anxiety, every lingering sense of emptiness, it's their soul whispering you cared more than you were willing to admit, and you still do. When an avoidant misses you but doesn't feel safe enough to say it, they won't reach out directly. They won't send a message that says, "I've been thinking about you," or "I miss what we had." Instead, they resort to subtle behaviors, quiet tests, meant to gauge if you still care, without having to expose themselves emotionally. These aren't calculated games rooted in manipulation. These are subconscious defenses built from years of emotional survival. They might go quiet just to see if you'll reach out first. It's not about punishing you, it's about finding proof that they still matter without risking rejection. If you message them after days of silence, that reassures them, okay, they still care. I don't have to be vulnerable to know I'm wanted. And that tiny bit of reassurance helps them feel safe again, even if only temporarily. They may post vague quotes or cryptic stories that seem to hint at sadness, loss, or emotional depth, something that doesn't say your name but clearly points in your direction. It's a signal flare disguised as poetry, a safe way to be seen without actually standing in the open. They want you to notice, they want you to wonder, but they don't want to say it first. You might notice they accidentally like an old post or view your story the second you upload it. You might hear from mutual friends that they asked about you, pretending it was casual. These little acts are all small emotional fishing lines, ways to test the waters without diving in. But here's what makes it so painful. When you do respond, when you pass their test, they often retreat again. Not because you did something wrong, but because the emotional intensity becomes overwhelming. They wanted closeness, but now that it's available, it scares them. So they disappear again, creating a cycle of reaching and retreating that leaves you confused and emotionally drained. What they're really doing is asking, will you come closer, even if I can't meet you halfway? But they'll never say that out loud. They want to feel wanted without having to risk the vulnerability of expressing their own desire. These subconscious tests are their version of connection. Distant, guarded, and frustratingly indirect. And while they may never admit it, every test is a quiet confession. I miss you, but I don't know how to feel safe in missing you. Avoidants often respond to emotional closeness with distance. So when they miss you, their first instinct isn't to pull you in, it's to protect themselves. One of the most confusing and painful things about this is that they start mirroring your behavior. If you start to distance yourself because you're tired of chasing, they won't come running to stop you. They'll mirror that distance, sometimes even doubling down on it, not out of apathy, but out of fear. To someone with an avoidant attachment style, control is safety. They don't feel secure unless they're emotionally a step ahead, slightly detached, just out of reach. So if you stop reaching out, they often take that as a cue to emotionally shut down even further, not because they don't care, but because caring without control terrifies them. Here's where the pain really sets in. The more you try to protect your own heart by stepping back, the more they do the same. And suddenly, two people who care deeply about each other are locked in a silent standoff, each waiting for the other to break the silence, each scared of what it means to be the one who cares more. It becomes a game of emotional chess, but neither of you are playing to win. You're playing not to lose. This mirroring creates an illusion that they're unbothered, that they've moved on, that they're indifferent. But inside, they're watching. They're noticing. They're feeling. And the longer the silence stretches, the more they begin to spiral internally. But instead of breaking the pattern, they dig in deeper, because losing control of their emotions is a bigger fear than losing you. Sometimes they even preemptively detach just to beat you to it. They believe that if they withdraw first, they won't have to experience the pain of being abandoned. It's not about punishing you. It's about protecting themselves from the unbearable vulnerability of needing someone who might not be there forever. So when you pull back hoping they'll finally step forward, many avoidants don't. Not because they're cold, but because they've mistaken connection for danger. They mirror your distance to survive their fear, not to hurt you. And in doing so, they lose out on the very closeness they crave. Inside their silence is a storm, filled with longing, confusion, and self-protection. But rather than showing it, they tighten their grip on distance, thinking it will save them even if it costs them you. Avoidants may seem like they've closed the door and thrown away the key. They act distant, emotionally unavailable, and detached. But what most people don't realize is that deep beneath that emotional armor is a longing they can't turn off. a desire for connection, love, and closeness. They miss you. They want you, but they only want to reconnect on terms that feel emotionally safe to them. And safety, to an avoidant, doesn't look like emotional intimacy. It looks like control. They want the closeness without the risk. They want to feel loved without needing to be vulnerable. And that's the internal tug of war they live in. They might daydream about you. Think about what they'd say if they ever saw you again. They might replay your last conversation in their head over and over. They imagine reconciliation, not with raw emotion, but with subtle gestures. A glance, a passing text, a random encounter that lets them reconnect without ever having to admit they missed you. But reconnection without vulnerability is an illusion. It's a relationship without roots, and that's the only kind they feel safe enough to pursue. They may reach out with a casual, "Hey, hope you're doing well," message, something so light it almost feels meaningless. But behind it is a silent hope, "Please answer. Please show me I still matter." That message might come days, weeks, or even months after separation. But make no mistake, it's not random. It's a signal. Yet the moment you respond with emotion, with warmth, with openness, they might shut down again, because the very thing they crave, intimacy, also activates their deepest fear. They want to feel you close, but not so close that they lose themselves. They want to know they're loved, but they don't want to feel dependent. So they walk a tightrope, always trying to get just enough connection to feel secure without ever letting go of control. This is why avoidants often return with subtlety, not apology, with casualness, not confession. They want reconnection, but only if it costs them nothing emotionally, and many of them don't realize that love that costs nothing means nothing. Because until they can face their fear of vulnerability, every attempt at closeness will be filtered through the same lens: how do I get love without risking pain? And that's a question love can never truly answer. When an avoidant misses you, it's almost never in the way you expect. They don't chase, they don't confess, and they certainly don't open up easily. Instead, they feel everything in silence. Their longing hides behind distraction, defensiveness, and detachment. But just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not there. Their silence is not emptiness, it's a battlefield. Inside, there's a war between their need for connection and their deep-seated fear that closeness will cost them everything they've built to feel safe. And the sad truth is, most of them don't even understand they're doing it. They're not trying to be cruel. They're trying to survive their own emotions. Every move they make, blaming you, distracting themselves, pulling away, testing your patience, mirroring your distance, pretending not to care, is a coping mechanism, not a reflection of your worth. When they miss you, they don't lean in, they retreat. They don't say, "I need you." They think it quietly and punish themselves for feeling weak. Their way of loving has been shaped by pain, by loss, by early experiences that taught them vulnerability equals danger. So now, even when they miss you deeply, they hide behind self-protection. They armor up with silence, not because you're unworthy of love, but because love feels like a risk they're too afraid to take. And that's the tragedy of the avoidance story. They often lose the very people they care about because they cannot say the simple words, "I miss you. I care. I'm afraid." Instead, they hope you'll read between the lines, decode the silence, and reach for them first. But love cannot survive in that kind of guessing game. Real connection demands truth. It demands presence. And when one person is always hiding behind fear, the relationship becomes emotionally lopsided, no matter how deep the love may be underneath. So if you've loved an avoidant and you're trying to make sense of the silence, this is your clarity. They did care. They likely still do. But their care is trapped inside a mind that equates closeness with danger and a nervous system that panics at intimacy. Their absence was not proof you didn't matter. It was proof they weren't ready to face their own heart. And no matter how badly you wanted to break through, you cannot heal someone by proving you're safe. They must choose to open that door themselves. In the end, your peace matters too. You can have empathy for their wounds without abandoning your own needs. You can honor their struggle without shrinking your voice. And sometimes, The most powerful act of love is not chasing, not waiting, but walking forward with grace, knowing you were real, your love was true, and their silence was never a reflection of your worth, only of their fear. Thank you for watching. If this message touched your heart or brought you clarity, know that you're not alone on this journey. Healing from confusing relationships and navigating attachment dynamics takes courage, and you're already showing that just by being here. If you found value in this video, please give it a like, share it with someone who needs to hear this, and subscribe for more deep, healing, and empowering content. Your support truly means the world. And don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss a moment of truth, clarity, and connection. Until next time, take care of your heart, stay grounded in your truth, and remember you are worthy of love that doesn't run. Goodbye for now, and I'll see you in the next video.